Hello, denizens of the sunlight realm. This is Solotl here with a speed paint of my brand shiny new YouTube banner. For this, I thought I'd show the whole process from start to finish, and as you can see, I began with a selection of Minecraft screenshots. I tried to get a few that had a nice composition that I was looking for, something that could be a good reference for an underwater cave. Somewhere nice to call home, you know? Once I got the lines down, I started with getting the broad strokes in. I wasn't sure what process I wanted to use for this going in, and at first I tried using color to get a feel for the aesthetics, but I ended up settling on just using black and white to make sure I really nailed the values and composition of the piece. I ended up settling on the second one that I'm working with here, since I really liked how the darkness on either side framed the lighting in the center, while still feeling open and mysterious. When I managed to get the values of this first one down the way I wanted to see it, I realized it was a little too open up top and didn't feel quite cave-like enough. And then I didn't even bother value mapping for the other screenshots I took, since I liked the second one so much. From there, it was just a matter of refining. This took the bulk of the time spent on the background, as I wanted to make sure it looked more like a naturally formed rock cave. For this part, I used a texture brush to smooth out the gradients, while also adding the details and sharpening lines. I made the light sources more coherent rather than just having things closer to the camera be darker, as in my initial value map. A few little touches, as with the stalactites, helped break the shapes of the lights up and add a bit more interest. From start to finish, this picture took me about 3.5 hours. I'm showing it here sped up about 30 times. By this point in the drawing, I dropped the original references completely, working just from where I'd placed down the values and lines. I made sure not to focus too much on any one area of the image, to make sure the entire piece felt equally refined as any other part of it, which really just means I got to bounce around the whole thing like a hyperactive frog. And listen, I know I'm an amphibian too, but salamanders are way more chill. At this point, I realized the third light source down below was only confusing where I was able to put shadows and highlights, so I went ahead and scratched that out, and the piece really started coming together. All I had left to do then was to smooth out some of the areas that had a bit too much texture, in a way that read more like weird airbrush than rock, and was that. Once the values were down, it was time to add color. I went for a deep blue using a color layer, then added the shadows and highlights back in with some overlay and multiply. The focus of this piece was mainly going to be the background, though after I got through it, I was like, still missing something. So on impulse, I went ahead and added myself in there too. You'll see that coming up in a few. Sketching myself was probably the easiest part of this process, and through most of it, I honestly thought I was going to have to scrap that whole part. But it all came together at the end and made for a really nice piece. Love me some rim lighting and glowy effects. I think I'm most proud that I was able to do all this in such a relatively short amount of time. I don't normally just go for painting a character without a good idea that is going to be what I do going in. But the oil brush seriously helped bring the whole piece together. A big thing that helped was that the brush I used allowed for a wet-on-wet kind of feel with the paint, so I could color pick from the background, bringing those colors into my clothes and hair, allowing the shadows to melt into each other for a more cohesive look. Of course, my gills and bioluminescence took a bit of figuring out, but honestly, I'm really happy with how this whole thing turned out. Here's where I pulled in the textures for my clothes. I just have a royalty-free stock image that I'm using and mashing it on there with an overlay, knocking the transparency down. And then I added some final touches, and there we go. It is all done. I'm also excited to share more of these processed speed paints in the future. Give me a follow if you'd like to see more. I have a few in backlog that I plan to post soon.